the golden opportunity. The market is so huge, but it is very hard to crack the U.S. market. And I think it's just been ever since the Wild Wild West, if you will, just the appeal of coming to this new country that has allowed entrepreneurs to flourish. When I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, it was very interesting to me to see that many of the people who came over are true entrepreneurs. They couldn't grow and expand in France or Slovenia, if you will, because the market is too small in those countries. So maybe they have a really brilliant idea, but they aren't able to access capital or access the right people or the market. And they need to come to the United States in order to explore that, just because of the limitations in their own environments.
Welcome to Transatlantic Titans, the show for Europeans making it big in America. And here is your host, Manny Schoenhuber.
Hello and welcome to Transatlantic Titans, the show about Europeans making it big in America. I'm your host, Manny Schoenhuber, and I am very excited to welcome Erin McKelvey to this episode today. Erin, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to do this with you, Manny.
Thank you. I appreciate it as well. So, Erin, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Who is Erin McKelvey? What brought you all the way to Texas? Where are you now? What's the story?
Well, that's a long story, so I'll try to keep it short.
We have all the time.
Okay. Like many people in Texas, I'm a transplant. Came originally from the Pacific Northwest in the Seattle area and was, I would say, taken as a child from God's country to, well, whatever we can describe West Texas as, at the age of 10. So it was a big shock. I started taking French in high school and developed a love of France. And then I was fortunate to have opportunities to study there and just started working my way through anything but the corporate world because I wanted to learn in a global environment. And after living and working in France for several years, including a stint with a bicycle touring company in Beaune, I worked in sales in Dallas, volunteered for the French American Chamber, and ended up in nonprofit. So I was working to put on the largest Beaujolais festival in the world in Dallas, Texas. That is true, in the 90s. And then since then, I've worked with the French American Chamber, built my own import business, worked some in a large corporate firm, which underscored that I was right all along to avoid that. And then came back to nonprofit in Dallas, first with the Dallas Committee on Foreign Relations, and then back to the French American Chamber, which I transitioned to European in 2021.
Well, let's unwrap there. Maybe let's start at the transatlantic life that you really, I think, got to enjoy over the years. How has that experience maybe enriched you? Maybe that's the right word.
I have a great love for what teachers do and what they push students to do and to go out and learn and be and just explore before they jump into life, family, the corporate world, etc. So my mother would always tell me, no, you can't go back to Europe. And I'd say, I sold my books. Bye. I'll be back in a few months. And at that time, it was really not scary to go over and just spend time. Of course, there was probably some boyfriends in Europe involved, but I really enjoyed the cultures, the people, the way of life, and especially the food and wine. So I just kept going back. And that's how I became very European focused, if you will. And just like the way of life and the way of thinking. That's not to say that we don't have a great life and way of thinking in the United States, but it is important for young people to get out and explore, whether you're interested in Europe or anywhere else in the world.
Washington State to West Texas was not explored.
Washington State to West Texas, I'm telling you, if you haven't watched Landman, there is a lot of truth to that. No, you can't drive from Midland to Fort Worth and back in a day. Well, you can, but you don't just jump in the truck and do that. So there are some misrepresentations, I would say. However, a lot of that kind of crazy life is what I experienced.
So you had to get out and experience the French
I mean, if you're stuck in Midland, Texas for a while, You definitely need to broaden your horizons.
So, and that brought you to France, and I think since then you've never really lost the connection to France in particular, right? You were also able to transition that into your business, non-corporate but non-profit career.
Exactly. When I came back from France, and now I love going all over Europe, I have a bucket list. My husband, or I should say, life list. A friend of ours always said, my life list has a lot of countries on it. And my husband and I have been every year we say, okay, where are we going this year so that we can broaden who we know and what we know about Europe and other countries.
But then McKelvey is not the typical French name, right?
It's not. And in fact, my first husband, we're still good friends, was French. And as I tell so many people, and this is what I would always say, I will never marry a Frenchman. Well, I married a Frenchman and my last name was Petit. So Erin Petit ran the French American Chamber, and that was great until I decided to go back to my maiden name. And it's still great. McKelvey is a great name for any country. I'm telling you.
Well,
And then
yeah.
I said I would never marry a Texan, and I married a Texan, but I kept my maiden name.
So maybe you should have a not life list, not bucket
Exactly.
list of all the things you don't want to do, because then you know you will do them.
That's why I don't say I will never do anything ever again. Just try to keep my mouth shut. Learning. It's
What's
taken a
the
long time.
what's the number one destination that's still on the bucket list or life list?
Going back to Italy, I think spending more time there, and then some more Eastern European countries. We've been to Hungary, Croatia, Slovenia is wonderful, and I'd like to try a few others. Check those out.
So maybe, and then to uh yeah, build the bridge to the nonprofit and business chamber of commerce work that you do today. Sounds like you're also able to combine the best of both worlds, right? The business and the pleasure between Europe and Texas in particular, but Europe and the US. Maybe talk a little bit about the European American Chamber of
Absolutely. We transitioned to European in 2021. So this is actually our fifth anniversary year, and we need to have a big celebration or several. And it was such a great decision because in North Texas, has always been a lack, I would say, over the last 25 years of European organizations. We know that the Houston is a port city. That's where the consulates have been historically, because that was where the major international flights left from to Africa and to Europe. So Dallas Fort Worth, even though it is now the fourth largest metropolitan area in this country, and will overtake Chicago in the next few years in population, never had a strong European group of chambers or any, international chambers for that matter. Now it does. So the French American Chamber started out, I want to say 1978 or 79 in Dallas. The French American Chamber helped begin the foundation of international in North Texas with the founding of the Dallas International School, which now has two campuses here, and the Alliance Française, and also Dallas Accueille. So for many, many years, 42 years, Dallas was one of the only cities in the United States with all of those things for international companies to come here and bring their families and to integrate and assimilate easily into the social environment and schools, et cetera. So schooling is so, so important. And so other than that, there was only the Finns and the Swedes currently who have chambers of commerce here. There used to be a part-time person with the German chamber, and there was a part-time British American chamber, and they closed a long time ago in Dallas. So that had never really developed, and with Erasmus, with all of the people working and living between countries in Europe, going to schools across Europe, these companies had a much more variety of countries represented within themselves. So say Essilor used to only be the French PDG and his wife who were here. And then it became just like Safran, Airbus, and many others, Nokia, Ericsson. Then all of those people were coming from different countries. And there weren't only Swedes or Finns at Nokia and Ericsson. There were people from Italy, people from, different places. So that started piquing my interest, and they were coming to our events, but they weren't joining the chamber because they didn't feel that the French chamber was their chamber. And when we started talking about becoming European and doing more European focused events, then it was really exciting to the region. And that is what inevitably pushed us to decide to become pan-European in focus.
Weird how us Europeans are sometimes, right? You have the AmCham, which pretty much covers all 50 states representing in Europe. But then you have all the different small countries of Europe having their own nationalized
Right.
Chamber of Commerce in the
And
US.
it's important to note that the AmCham, especially in the United States, not in every European country, but the AmCham is a lobbying organization. We do not have any lobbying activities. We don't focus, we don't have any activities that are governmental. We are not funded by a government. We are totally independent, nonprofit chambers of commerce. There are 8 of us, kind of 8.5 at the moment. We
Can
have
you name
5.
all of them?
I can. So in the United States, we have New York, the Carolinas, Florida, Cincinnati, and Texas. And in Europe, we have Amsterdam, Paris, and Lyon. And we did a soft opening for a chapter in Milan last year. And we're actively looking to expand our chapters into other states and other countries.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit more about what the idea of that European American Chamber of Commerce is. What do you do, for example, although you said, okay, we're not doing government relations work, obviously you're doing a bunch of events with dignitaries, with government representatives, but then you also are in the weeds of helping European companies as they're looking to the US, right?
Right, right. It's a lot. And it's a lot and it's a lot of fun. Going from French or from France, from one country, as our German director in New York said, if it isn't the Germans and the French leading the way and broadening, then who should it be? So we decided to lead. Our board members, who were French and American, said, we want to become European. We want to lead, and we want to broaden across the whole state of Texas. So we not only went from France to all of Europe, but from Dallas-Fort Worth to all of Texas. That was, as we say in Texas, go big or go home. And that's the way I live my life. Sometimes it comes back to overwhelm me on certain days, but it's a lot of fun. And our goal and our mission as a nonprofit is to accelerate business between Europe and Texas, which means that I work with all of the different countries, which all have their specific. So if you're going to Europe, each country has its own trade policies and incentives and cultural differences and business norms. And it's the same coming to the United States. If each of the consulates and trade organizations in the state of Texas are all here to promote business for their own countries. And that's important. So we serve to, as much as I can, bring everyone together for Europe, for a stronger European voice in Texas, to work with everyone to help strengthen what they're doing and promote it. If they need my help or want to do an event together, we're happy to do that. If they really just want to focus on their own initiatives, then that's fine too. But it's really important that Europe can get together and speak to all together as a voice in the state of Texas. And that's pretty much the goal. So we help companies who are coming here, and to a lesser extent, companies, learn about Europe. We focus on a pan-European aspect. We work very closely with the EU delegation and the European Commission. And so we jump in when needed and stand back when not needed. The goal is to bring people together and to help make sure that the companies coming into Texas, for example, find the right leadership and the right people to assist them and the right connections, whether that be if they're more comfortable speaking German or Swedish and we need to call in someone to help them, then we do that. I always make sure we're very transparent. And as part of the Enterprise Europe Network, we have partners across Europe who are chambers of commerce, associations, say like incubators who work with companies. So they will reach out to me and say, okay, I have a company who wants to export to the United States, or they need a joint venture contact, or they need a particular part that they're looking for. Then our job is to try to connect them with a company that can help them.
One aspect that you just mentioned, which I always find super important, is of course the cultural, but then also the language.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm not making, as a lawyer, I'm not making any assumptions, but I would assume your French is pretty good. Do you speak any other languages?
My French is very good. I'm lazy a lot of times, but I don't speak any other languages. I got a little confused on in Spanish with the L and L between French and Spanish, so I gave it up. I can sort of understand what people are saying in those languages. The most difficult, or at least in my opinion, are the Eastern European languages. And then I just say, somebody just fill me in when you're done. And yeah, cultural differences, languages, what these companies need to know to come here is a it's so critical. And it's amazing to me how so many countries have always focused on English. For example, the Dutch and the Nordic countries, they speak English so well that it's makes it much easier for them to work with Americans than other countries. Even that German accent gets me sometimes. I
Oh,
know a few.
for East Texas accent is what I call
Far
it.
East Texas, that's my husband, actually. His accent isn't quite that bad, though.
I've met him before, and yeah,
Do you have
I don't
trouble
think
understanding him?
no, no, but I've been here long enough, I guess. I'm trying my best.
It's his jokes that are difficult to understand.
Maybe the sense of humor, right?
The sense of humor.
Which Germans are, of course, famous for, as you
Mhm. Like the British.
like the British.
Germans have an interesting sense of humor. In fact, speaking of Germany, my husband was stationed in Germany in the Air Force. So that has been on his life list. I used to go to Germany to Frankfurt to for trade shows when I was importing products, and worked with a German chef who had invented the product that I was selling in the United States. So I spent some time going over there to the trade shows, and it was a lot of fun. So it's on his life list to go back to Germany, and we are putting together a group. I will be going to Germany at the end of June for the Enterprise Europe Network internationalization meetings, and these are the people in within this like 800 partner network who are interested in international, which is what we do, helping their companies move out of Europe and export and expand. And that will be in conjunction with GTEX, and that is in Berlin at the end of June. So we want to get a group of EACC members and companies from North Texas who are interested in going. And if they put together at least 3 business meetings through the platform that's available, then they will not have to pay for their ticket into GTEX. So I think it's a great opportunity for Texas companies to go and learn and meet and enthusiastically talk about business in the United States.
Well, I know obviously you as the CEO and president of the EACC in Texas, you're always busy and you always have things on your plate, which is great and always have the plans. But what are, as you would describe it, like the typical services that you or the EACC network is able to offer European companies that are looking to expand to the, you've already mentioned
Sure.
joint venture partners, making introductions, things like that. But if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure. As a network within the network, we have the Enterprise Europe Network. Um, we are all of our chapters in the United States are part of that now, but our original 3 chapters who joined were New York, the Carolinas, and Texas. And we did a series of webinars for the European Commission, which can be found on the EACC YouTube channel, of course, and our website. There will be a link there. But we did 8 webinars in 2024, companies to understand very specific, whether it was immigration, intellectual property, and Manny, you participated in one of those as well. We really focused on a number of different topics instead of trying to do, a broad webinar on coming to the United States, because every state in this country is just as different and varied as every country in Europe. So it's incredibly important that we educate. All of our programs, we don't do social programs. We do educational programs, panels, webinars. We do actually have our Experience Europe event coming up in May. That is quite social, but it's business networking. We bring all the countries together and it's a lot of fun. But going back to education, education is the most important thing that companies need, whether they're just learning that they're not prepared, but they need a lot of information before coming to the United States. And even though those webinars are only about an hour long, they can get really, really good basic information on taxation, on legal issues, and so many things. So that's one of the important things we do. We did a few of those last year, and now we're putting topics together for another round with the European Commission. There are so many companies in Europe that are so bright and have so much to offer, and they really need a good foundation, and they need good information and smart information. And feel like there we go. So that's the type of things we do. Panel discussions. We just did one. We have a committee called the Transatlantic Trade Alliance, and that committee was formed a year ago to really focus on trade, the tariffs, logistics, supply chains issues, so that companies can get together with our members and learn what's changed, how it's going to affect their business. The one we had this week on Monday was called Straight Talk. And even though it wasn't so much focused on Europe, it's really a global issue right now with the Strait of Hormuz. So we focused on what's happening and how this is affecting customs and all the things that companies need to be aware of. And the most important thing, I think it's always the most important thing, is that large companies, they have built-in departments to handle many of these things. And so they are looking down the road, 1, 3, 5 years and how to mitigate risk. Most smaller companies don't have those risk-averse decisions in place. And it's very important to do that in this day and age, because our global situation is changing constantly. And even the relationship between Europe and the United States is changing a great deal right now, and it will impact all of us in the future.
So, as you just talked about different size companies, is there a sweet spot of European companies size wise where you think you and the EACC network as the most value?
I have seen everything from, tiny companies to major corporations who have come to us to ask for assistance. And the major corporations, it always surprises me because I say, don't you have a department that handles that? I don't know that there's a sweet spot. I would say what someone said to me that I thought was really important once is, and he's from Hungary, he said, these companies, for example, a company coming from Hungary needs to know how to export to the 6 or 7 countries that surround Hungary before they try to come to the United States. They should really be comfortable with the idea of exporting and know what it takes before jumping into the largest market in the world. The United States is not just one, even though we call it a melting pot. It's a pot of many states with many regulations and completely different cultural, just like Europe, and every state has its own rules. So getting back to the size of a company, they should at least be successful and have done some research on whether their product will even fit in the United States. I don't know if there's a sweet spot in size, but at least I would hope they would at least be doing a few $1 million in business before they try to come over here, because that's also a burden on the CEO. Sometimes they say, well, I have a client in the United States and I want to grow that business. That's great, but that is a long-term project, not just a let's go see if it works project.
Yeah. So, what do you think then is still to this date with, of course, the uncertainty that you just mentioned, changing relationships, but yet you also said that the US as the number one market. What
Right.
do you think is the appeal for, let's say, I'm a Slovenian company thinking about the US market? Yes, everything is big and juggling time zones and cultures and language differences. But what do you think makes it special? What's the appeal coming to the US, entering the US market?
I think it's always the what did they call it? The golden opportunity. The market is so huge, but it is very hard to crack the US market. And I think it's just been over ever since the wild, wild west, if you will, just the appeal of coming to this new country that has allowed entrepreneurs to flourish. When I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, it was very interesting to me to see that many of the people who came over are true entrepreneurs. They couldn't grow and expand in France or Slovenia, if you will, because the market is too small in those countries. So maybe they have a really brilliant idea, but they aren't able to access capital or access the right people or the market. And they need to come to the United States in order to explore that just because of the limitations in their own environments. Those entrepreneurs are people who like to try and try again. And that's what this country offers. If you fail in certain countries in Europe, and I won't mention where, if you fail, you are branded as a failure. That's it. You're done. In the United States, if you fail, you get it back up and you start over and you go to the next thing, or you go back and fix what you failed and you start over. And that is a very cultural difference, big cultural difference between many countries in Europe and the United States, is that you can do that. So that's why a lot of people come to the United States, because they feel that they can't explore and move forward and try again and keep going where they are. So I think that's important. It's just the draw of the opportunity that's here.
We always like a good comeback story.
Exactly. Well, there's no such thing in some countries. You're
Yeah. So you of course know what the logical follow-up question is then, because you said about cracking the market. How can, based on your experience and what you've seen over the years, how can European companies crack the American market and make it big here in the US?
they have to have money. It's sad to say, but I mean that is life. You have to understand what it's going to cost you to come to the US market, whether it's in legal fees, accounting fees, hiring salespeople, which can
Everybody always starts with the legal fees.
well, they're always the worst, right? Well, accounting and legal fees are usually, right up there. So if you don't have an understanding of the budget it's going to take you, I mean, you talk to companies all the time, Manny, you know that can be a sticker shock for them. And that tells you right away that they are not prepared, because they really need to have a budget. They need to understand what it's going to cost, even in immigration attorneys, to get things done, and time. And you don't just jump in and make a go of it in 1 year. This is a 3 to 5 to 10-year plan. And I only see the companies succeed that are either very aggressive and have a very good product and are very good salespeople themselves, or they have a very good plan and they understand the cost of starting a business can be very low, but it's everything else that goes into that. And just putting it all together is really, I don't know what you would tell a company their normal budget should start off with, but I'm quite certain it's far more than $10,000 or $20,000.
Yes, especially if they want to become members of the European
Oh,
American
you're
Chamber.
right. Or use your legal services.
Well, that yes, yes. No, just kidding. But maybe to then ask or state the obvious, how important do you think is it for those companies to maybe work with a geographic
Hmm.
area focused group of advisors, such
Right.
as the European Chamber of Commerce, such as
It's
lawyer, accountant, banker, whatsoever?
exactly. Exactly. So when we transitioned to European, that was really super important to me. I knew it would take several years to not only get through the transition, really work on our image, in the state of Texas to meet with many of the consular and trade officials to show them that we're very transparent. We're here to help. And it's incredibly important because if they land, for example, I spoke to a Dutch, I would call it logistics firm in Houston a while back, and they was interesting. They had someone from the UK, someone from Costa Rica, and someone from the Netherlands working in their office. And the gentleman from the UK said, "Oh yeah, we help companies start in the US." And I said, "Really? So you're a logistics firm and you're giving advice to companies who are coming to how to start a business?" "Oh yes, I just sent them to my lawyer friend down the street and he helps them start their business." Well, uh, that is, that's so sad to me because that lawyer friend may have absolutely no knowledge of what it takes to have an international business or the tax implications or the legal implications or how to set up the company the right way, depending on whether they're manufacturing, as you know, or different types of business. It's incredibly important that they meet people who are internationally knowledgeable of how to set up their companies the right way. One of our members who moved to New York, Robert Smith, it was one thing he taught me early on was if we can get to them before they start the company in the United States, before they open a subsidiary, we can save them a lot of headache and money and everything in the long run. It's about setting up your structure the best way for that company. Same thing with legal services. As you've said many times, getting a contract in the United States and then to sell products from someone and to distribute your products, that's very exciting to a company. It's super exciting. Oh my gosh, we're going to crack the United States and make millions. And then they don't take the time to have a legal um, viewpoint and someone in the legal field review their contracts, and then bad things happen to them and they have a terrible experience. My role is as a connector for companies to say, okay, we've brought together immigration, IP, general law firms, and accounting firms that are specifically tailored to your manufacturing type of business or family owned. There's so many variables in there that I've learned. As I learn about my members, I have an idea who maybe two or three might be great choices for them. So my job is not to give them a list and say, go for it. My job is to say, okay, what are your needs? What is important to you? And I want you to talk to several people and find out who the right person is for you to work with. And that's really important. It's kind of like bringing them under a bubble, if you were. I don't like using the term soft landing, but it's more of bringing a knowledge base together for them where they have options and that they're working with people that we know that have been in business for a long time and have a solid background on that rather than the guy down the street. That's really important.
Yeah, I obviously couldn't agree more.
We also give them not a social base, but a business social base. It's like a family. You're joining a family of like-minded people who are here to help you.
I'd like to say we're sitting in the same boat, right, when it comes to
hmm
that.
hmm Because it really can be daunting to land in a huge state like Texas, and know where to go. Everyone is in so many places. Everyone is, just out to make a dollar, and it's really important to us that okay, they're working with people that we know and trust and have vetted, if you will, for want to use that term in some ways. And the people in Texas are so helpful. It's always a surprise to many Europeans when they come here and they say, even Americans even New Yorkers who come to Texas, and they say, we can't believe how nice people are and how they actually want to help us and help us in our business and introduce us to people. It's such a difference between a lot of other states. And I don't know what it is, but it's a historical thing. People just, helping out their neighbors. And it is a great state to do business in. Other things can be a little wonky sometimes, but as far as business, it is a really great state to do business in.
Well, let's talk about this. And I'm going to generalize a little bit on purpose because you've experienced it really firsthand and continue to do so, what it means to do business on both sides of the Atlantic, right? You get the firsthand knowledge and the firsthand experience. So, how would you describe then what business or how business is different between Europe and the US, and where could be some of the misconceptions that Europeans still have about doing business in the US or Texas, if you'd like?
Misconceptions, I mean, it's a huge the biggest misconception is that every state is the same, that the East Coast and the West Coast are the only places to go. Um that if they land in Texas, then they need to land in Austin. All of these are misconceptions, and entirely depends on so many factors. And that's why it's important to have guidance even before you come to the United States. I'd say owners who get involved going back and forth to the United States to start a business, rather than focusing on their core business in Europe, that they end up failing because they try to do too much and are overstrained and don't take on people here. As I said earlier, the mistakes and misconceptions about hiring people, about the not understanding that employment laws are different in every state and that taxation is different in every state. And so they really need to know which part of the country or the part of Texas that makes the most sense for their specific product, even, and the cost of hiring in the United States, and where even industry specific workforce that they're looking for. They need to land in the place that has those people for them. So there are the cultural discussion that you're bringing up is almost impossible to go through because it's just so broad. The business differences between country to country in Europe can be just as great in the United States. Someone in Texas is going to be very different to do business with than someone in New York or Los Angeles. And so I think that's why a long-term plan and getting a university involved in helping you do research, or there's many different ways of going about it, but really looking at what you're trying to accomplish in the United States, what your product is. And one of the most interesting discussions we had on a webinar was about energy. And look at the need for energy that is skyrocketing with the data centers that are going in all over the United States. So Europeans, the rest of the world, I didn't even understand that the energy grids across the United States are an unbelievable maze. And Texas has its own energy grid,
Or
which,
mess?
thank you, which is another discussion. And yes, Houston is the energy capital of the world. However, the money that funds the energy capital of the world comes out of Dallas. And so there's a lot of research that needs to be done before you just decide to drop in somewhere. Is the energy grid going to be what is needed for your products? So I don't know if that I really answered your question there, but doing business is a person to person transaction. So if you don't do your research when you go to Europe to do business in each country, you should really spend some time either with a professional company that teaches cross-cultural differences, or at least Google it, because the Dutch and the Americans are both I think they speak better English than we do most of the time, but we are both very straightforward and go to the point very quickly, more quickly than other countries. Some countries don't want to talk business until they know a lot about you. And Americans can get very personal. I was listening to some people in the airport in a line the other day telling each other, it was on a bus, telling each other their life story. And as someone who's lived in Europe, that just is
Not a thing.
not a thing, not a thing that you do. But yes, they're children, they're everything. So it's not something that the Europeans are comfortable with. You don't talk about money, in many countries. So get to figure out where you're going and where those cultural norms, especially in business, come in so that you don't make a big mistake right off the bat. Of course, in Texas, you can say anything to anyone. That's why my husband sits in a different aisle in every airplane we go on because he's from East Texas and he loves to talk to everyone. And he will tell people that I have never seen in my life all about his wife and what she does. And it's great that he's proud of me, but that is terribly embarrassing for me.
Yeah, and maybe sometimes a little weird to the average European, right?
Yeah.
But no, I think, especially in the South in the US, what I've learned over the past now 15 years having lived here, it's just very open. And we would consider it friendly. And some European countries you'd consider it weird, right?
Hmm. I consider it TMI. And
That as well, that's fine as well. But maybe on that note, if we're looking at the business landscape, and obviously you have a lot of experience over the years seeing it on the French American side, now the European American side, but
Mhm.
has that business landscape changed over the years for European companies entering the US market?
It's changed a lot. And, hate to say that I've been doing this for that long, but I ran the French American Chamber in Dallas in the late 90s when it really was only the PDG of the French company coming with his trailing spouse, and he was the only one who could work. So if you look at the past couple of decades, and when I came back to the French American Chamber in 2018, it was amazing to me when I started doing my research as to whether I even wanted to go back into that type of work that I had always enjoyed. But how was the landscape different now, and what was I looking at? How had Dallas, Fort Worth, and Texas changed in that time period, and it's just been absolutely dramatic, especially North Texas. Going from the changes in immigration, the ability of people to work, the ability of so many Europeans to come over here with a company, for example, Ericsson, and then decide to stay and start their own businesses. So that you didn't really see before. And what I find is very interesting that I found out with when COVID happened. Yes, I said the word. But so many expats in Houston in the oil business were being sent back to France, for example, and the Netherlands. The big oil companies in the Houston area were sending a lot of people back. And so I reached out to some of the aerospace companies in our area in North Texas and my members and said, are you seeing this? I mean, is this happening in your company? Are people being sent back? And the response that surprised me was we're not expats. We live here. We've lived here for 15, 20 years. We're not going back. And that's another big difference just in the state of Texas. There are North Texas area is now is much more internationalized and international than it was 10 years ago. That has just been a phenomenal and huge change. There's so much business development going on in North Texas and across this state, in Houston, in Austin, San Antonio, and there's so many opportunities that people are coming and staying and deciding to create their own businesses. So that is a big difference over the last 10 to 15 years, and the way that the state has changed and the number of people who have, I mean, I don't know what it's still like, probably 75,000 a month, or it was at one time, coming into the state of Texas has just been overwhelming. I think that has dried up somewhat. And in fact, the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, when they talked about the economy in Texas, said that last year was pretty much a net zero for hiring for jobs in the state of Texas, and that the growth had really come from these AI data centers. And a lot of that has to do with the changes that are happening now, that people are not coming to the United States out of fear and because they can't get visas and can't get through immigration, and we're pushing people out of the country. How are we going to fill jobs in the future? How are we going to grow as a global society? And a lot of companies are Some of them are still coming. As you know, there are still a lot of companies coming to Texas, thankfully, but they are weighing those decisions. And a lot of it has to do on tariffs, whether they're coming to try to mitigate tariffs or they're not coming because of tariffs. I think there's both directions. And it is still a land of opportunity, but there are definitely a lot more risks now in just picking up and coming over here. So
What do you tell those companies then that may be a little hesitant about entering the US market in general or coming to Texas in particular?
I tell them that there's a lot of opportunity, but to take your time, meet with people, and going back to why a chamber of commerce and what we do can be so important to these companies is that I pretty much hold their hand in a certain sense and say, you need to learn about where you should be opening up, or you need to speak to this person and learn from their experience. There are a lot of Europeans here that have opened multiple businesses in the United States, and they have a vast experience, and they are always happy to share the failures and the triumphs and help people. And I think the biggest mistake that companies make is not reaching out and getting involved in business networking organizations. Don't stick to your own language, don't stick to your own country. Meet the Americans, meet people from everywhere, get lots of different opinions, not just one. There are places in Texas who are giving land away to manufacturing firms. And we have 8 EDCs, or EDOs as we call them, economic development corporations, cities, mostly around the Dallas area, but also out in Longview and Henderson. Every region of the state has different incentives. This is something that's very, very different from other states, like the Carolinas, like Tennessee, for example, where they have regional groups that are there to give incentives to companies, and they promote their whole region. The state of Texas within the governor's office, there is the Office of Economic Development, honestly really only work with the really big companies because that's their job. They don't have the staff or the time to work with small companies. Whereas there are economic development cities, Frisco, Plano, Arlington, so many, Dallas, etc., that have different incentives for different sizes of business. And most of that hinges on how many jobs you're creating. That's super important for companies to know coming here, because if they try to waste a lot of time meeting and getting incentives when they're only bringing 2 employees into the state, that is a waste of time for everyone. However, if they're going to be starting larger operations, I shouldn't say it's a waste of time, because you always learn. You learn where you need to be in order to get that. But I've also talked to a large car interior manufacturing firm who was coming over to North Texas to start sending machines over and opening a manufacturing facility, like, quickly. And I said, why didn't you you could have gotten incentives? And he said, I know, we just didn't have time. They wanted to do it immediately. The city of Houston has city limits that go out 40 miles. That is very different than the city of Dallas, which has a much smaller footprint, yet has 15 cities over 100,000 people around it, between Dallas and Fort Worth. So the city of Houston is much larger than the city of Dallas. However, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is larger than the Houston metropolitan area, because we have so many cities in one area. And each of those cities has different incentives and different opportunities, and they focus on different types of business. So it's important to know, where your kids are going to school, whether they play sports, or, where are the best sports cities. If you're like the president of Airbus Helicopters, his daughter is one of, I think it was like number 9 in basketball at the age of 15 in all of Europe. And they moved over here, and suddenly they had to find the right high school for her to be at because of her skills in basketball. And she had universities from all over the United States chasing her. So it was a very, very big transition and decisions for them to make, and very important decisions. because of their family and the talents of their daughter. So those are also things to think about for companies. Where is your family going to land? What special needs, or types of schooling are they looking for? All of these things should be thought out and checked on in advance. And we try to help people make those connections.
I think that's the perfect time to get to the next segment of the show, which is
Okay.
the core four. The
Uh-oh.
core four are the same four questions I ask every guest on every episode and hope to also get some good answers from you. Are you ready?
I think I already answered all of those.
TBD.
Next up, the core four.
Yeah, well, we'll start with the first one, which is all about challenges. So, as you're looking at those European businesses entering Texas, the US in general, what are the biggest challenges that you see?
All of those things put together that we've just been talking about. I would call it challenges and opportunities, really. And challenges in landing in the right state, the right place for your business, finding the right labor market, the people you're looking for, whether it's engineers or field hands. In fact, one interesting case in point was LVMH, who I want to say 2019, maybe 2019 or two. Yeah, it must have been right in there. Opened a manufacturing um, plant for Louis Vuitton outside of Dallas, in south of Dallas, I should say, kind of out in the boondocks, as we would say. And they have recently moved that facility to the west of Fort Worth because they didn't have the right workforce in the area where they first landed, and they had to move everything. They just couldn't. They couldn't find the I would say the types of skills they were looking for to create, purses and bags and things in the area where they originally located. So that was a huge mistake. And I think it all comes down to research of what your needs are. And they say, oh, we got a great opportunity because this area is giving us, free land, or they're giving us great incentives and they're giving us tax breaks. But do they have the people you need to work in your business? Do they have the engineers? Are there any universities around that can supply? What is the labor market like? Is it $50 an hour that people expect, or are they willing to work for 15 to 20 in a different part of Texas? Those are important. So those are biggest challenges is labor, understanding where to land, and hiring the right people, obviously, and not trying to bring in your own sales force from overseas. That's almost, I can't say it's always a mistake, but it's generally one that most companies make.
Well, from those mistakes, hopefully comes some lessons learned, which is the second of the core.
Well,
Or
I'm not sure.
that's why I said hopefully.
Hopefully. After they spent a lot of money trying to fix their mistakes or turning around and going home.
Well, we're not hoping for that.
No,
But
we're not.
if you could give those companies one piece of advice to those European companies entering the US market for the very first time or just thinking about it, what would it be?
I would say definitely a law firm or an attorney that is used to working with Europeans, very important, and knows what the expectations are and can talk to them from both sides of the Atlantic. And don't start a company until you've gotten multiple points of advice, and really look at the area you want to be in. Don't just come to Texas, or don't just go to LA or New York, which are very expensive and very difficult places to start a business. Do you work with a public company? Are you going to want to be on a stock exchange? Many of those. Do you need to raise money? Where can you raise money the easiest? So many questions like that. Look into that. Venture capital is, as we know, much in general, depending on what you do, easier to access in the United States than it is in Europe. And I know that Europe is working very hard on changing that perception and the opportunities for its companies. But all of those things are super important. And just because someone says the Big Apple is where everyone is, well, can you afford to live there? And does that make the most sense for your company? Because there is so much venture capital in Texas now that it's becoming very, very interesting. And a lot of the VCs from New York are either splitting their time between Texas and New York or moving their offices down here, and also from LA. Advice, just don't jump in. Pay attention to what you're doing. Does it translate into the United States? Do you have the funds, and do you have the strategic focus and a plan? Do you have a plan? That's the important thing.
To me, talking about the future is always exciting, right? So the third of the core four is a future outlook. What trends do you see that would or could be shaping a hopefully positive business environment for European companies in Texas or in the US over the next few years? Is that
That's been a
positive?
little, yeah, that's hard. That's hard to say with what's going on in the world right now. Texas has historically, um, and I say Texas because the business that's going on here is incredible. We have the ports, we have the rail systems, we have the logistics. DFW Airport. We're smack. The state is smack in the middle of east, west, north, and south. So it is logistically the center of the universe if you need to move goods, like we saw with the Great Recession, which was 15 years ago now that it started. Even a little before that, was that 2008, 2009? States like, I think California got hit first and maybe worst, I'm not sure. But this state has always known how to reinvent itself, especially North Texas, because there are not the ports. It's not a port city. So it's always had to look in other directions and diversify much more so than Houston, for example. A lot of the incentives have been taken away that were put in place for the last administration that were drawing a lot of European companies to the U.S., which is unfortunate and very detrimental to the businesses such as venture capital, et cetera, that puts money behind these things, and has brought a lot greater amount of risk. And that will just benefit the insurance companies in the long run, because they'll just keep raising the rates to insure everything. And I would say that's the unfortunate side of the business environment. But energy is becoming more and more critical. Houston was able to come back into positive because of what happened in Ukraine, because of Russia invading Ukraine and the need for energy. And now that's even more exasperated. Is that the right word? Exasperated, or no?
No,
There's
no, no.
there's a word there.
Yeah.
Um,
You're asking the non-native.
exacerbated.
You're asking the non-native speaker for the right vocabulary.
So the need for energy is critical, and defense, and those are business opportunities that are exploding right now, and space. So space, defense, and energy. Where are the greatest concentrations of those three things in the United States? I would say Texas and possibly Florida, but Florida has too many bugs for me, and
That's
hurricanes.
personal.
Well, nothing personal.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so again, you have to look at what states are going to have a difficult time because of their historical nature, but the state of Texas has all of those things, all those negative things that we're looking at now, defense. Well, space is pretty cool. And the lack of energy is a net plus for the state of Texas, because those are the biggest industries here. And the state of Texas has put a lot behind those things. We have our own space commission. We now have our own stock exchange. We have our own grid. We had that discussion earlier, whether that's good or bad, but there are a lot of renewables going on in this state. We have 25% more renewables than the state of California. The state of Texas doesn't like to admit that, but that's a truth. So
Glad we have finally a positive spin to that question.
yes, that there's a positive spin, depending on where you land. and it's a good one for this state over the future.
The golden nugget question of the core four is, of course, the fourth, which is about success factors. And as you draw back on all the companies that you've seen over the years, what do you think and what have you witnessed makes successful European companies here in the US actually successful? And what sets them apart from the quote unquote not so successful ones, or the ones that, as you said earlier, actually go back home?
That's a good question. I would have to know them, before, during, and after, I think. I know can be incredibly daunting to start a business here. I think it's incredibly difficult to get up every day when you really just need to land your first contract with someone to prove that you're doing it. That is the hardest thing to do. It can take, more than a year just to become known and actually get a contract. I've seen companies do huge contracts. One I can think of from Spain had a big flooring contract, I believe in the Carolinas. And I mean, just like huge, massive manufacturing plant type of contract. And they were doing really, really well. Well, when that contract ended, they didn't have other contracts backing it up. So they just imploded. That's unfortunate. They didn't have the right sales team and people going out and saying, this is what we do and this is what we're doing. Come see what we're doing, that type of thing. I think they really kept it maybe small-minded with just the few employees that they had that were stretched far too thin. And like, you and I are every day. But if you are doing those kinds of projects, you need to be out there selling it and selling more long before your contract ever comes to an end. And I think that's unfortunate because there was probably a lot of potential business for them. The setting successful apart from not so successful, that would be one thing, looking forward and not putting everything on your small staff in the United States. Getting the right people, the right salespeople, spending money on the right salespeople and the right distribution or type of sales that you need. And then being forward looking and positive, because it is daunting to enter this market and then suddenly realize how big it is. It's the people that get up with a nonstop go attitude every day. And I admire those people that just keep going and keep meeting and networking. Networking is so important in this country. As I laugh because, we try to teach, say, companies need to have an elevator pitch. Well, the funny side of that is that people don't speak to one another in elevators in Europe.
Very true.
So you have to be able to say, hey, this is what I do and this is where I can help you and I'd love to sit down with you. Hire a consultant if you need a consultant. Hire someone to help you get into those companies. That's daunting. It's not easy. Very difficult. So being successful has to do with realizing that you are not in the same place. Your business is not going to be done the same way. Your marketing will not be the same. Your employees will not be the same. And if you understand that and are ready to dive in and make those just brain changes, then there's great potential. But you can't sit in the way you did business in Slovenia. And I love the Slovenians, by the way. They do great business. But you can't sit in that mindset. You have to have you have to learn an American mindset.
Well, that concludes the core four and brings us to the next fun section of the
Okay.
show, which is the rapid fire, this or that round. I
Okay.
will ask you 6 questions and you
Oof.
can only pick one answer. Are you ready?
Yes.
And now, rapid fire, this or that.
Very convincing.
Now I'm looking at the first one and my answer is neither.
Yeah. So, rapid fire, this or that.
Okay.
Red wine or white wine?
Both.
Both. Great. US wine or French wine?
I'll get in trouble either way. French.
Dallas or Paris?
Come on. That's painful. Paris. Sorry.
Well, you already said both before, so but we locked in Paris. You meant Paris, Texas, right?
Yeah, of course.
Of course. Croissant or kolache?
Oh, croissant.
And now, as we're looking at McKelvey, your last name, whiskey or cognac?
Don't tell my husband cognac.
And of course, the final and last of the rapid fire, Texas or Europe?
Okay, I have to keep my job, Europe. And also because I just love the variety of Europe. I have, how many countries in Europe overall? There's 27 EU countries, but many more other countries to explore. So I'd have to say Europe. I mean,
That's it. That's the rapid fire. And
okay.
that brings us to the last few questions.
The last 500 questions.
Last few questions before we conclude here. But since you've experienced both sides of the Atlantic and business cultures on both sides of the Atlantic, what would be one thing, in your opinion, that American businesses could learn from European business culture?
Tact. Get to know people without being overly invasive, I guess. Sometimes that takes more time than we want it to have patience. I think it takes more patience.
It's a virtue.
That's a virtue. And I just know that since we became European and I went from learning about, working with one country, which can be a very difficult cultural country to work with in business and personally, meeting all of the different countries and embassies and people and diplomats and princes and princesses, and that Europe in general is so warm and welcoming and open. Forget the cliches of the past, unless you're going to Paris, and then don't expect the Parisians to be nice to you. They see millions of tourists every year. Just be nice to them and they'll be nice back. But overall, the European people and cultures are just so open and wonderful. And so go with an open mind.
Then coming back here, what do you love about helping European companies make it big in America? Because you've done that your entire career pretty much.
Well, I'm just here to connect people. It's a pleasure to watch. It's a pleasure to watch people succeed and grow, making new friends. Making business acquaintances that become lifelong friends that you are suddenly WhatsApping with back and forth, even if it's once or twice a year, and just broadening your horizons and understanding that we cannot be an insular society. Neither can Europe, neither can anywhere in this world. And the more people we know, the more you give your employees, your children, your everyone larger understanding of other cultures and places, then the better we all will be for that. So it's just fun seeing people come here and decide to stay and enjoy living in both directions, as a matter of fact.
Well, then, if I am one of those people who's thinking about the American market, Texas in particular, and want to get in contact with you, how can they reach you?
EACCTX.com. They can reach me by email, info@EACCTX.com. And those are the easiest ways. Come to an event if you're in Texas, and drop by, join us, come meet people, come to our offices in Dallas. I'm often in Houston and sometimes in Austin.
Obviously, add the contact information in the show notes. And I always like to conclude with maybe personal question, but do you have a personal quote or motto that guides you in business and life?
I probably do. Let's see. Well, I said it earlier, go big or go home
Great.
and dive in, enjoy life.
Nothing to add from my side as it comes to that, but of course, Erin, thank you for joining us at the very end. As you know, when you speak with a lawyer, there's always a catch-all
There's a
question.
caveat.
No, I'll take that with the right attitude, so no worries. But no, the catch-all question at the very end is there anything else you'd like to tell us, tell the audience, anything that we may have missed and that you think is important? If not, that's fine too, because I
Hmm.
really enjoyed our conversation.
I think I talked already too much, but just to come to Texas, be welcome. We don't all wear cowboy hats, but cowboy boots are in right now. So
Rodeo season.
you can walk around in those, and it's a really fun place to. The United States is a great place. Every state is great. Just know where you're going, and you're always welcome in Texas.
Perfect way to end this episode. Erin, thank you very much for joining us, for
Pleasure.
enlightening us, and wish you, of course, nothing but the best for the future. That's it for today. Wait. Before you go, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next one. And if you have thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like me to cover, drop a comment. I read every single one. If you're serious about entering or scaling in the US market, head over to masteringmarketentry.com or mannyschönhuber.com for more insights and resources. Thanks for listening, and until next time, go out there and make it big in America.